Hello. Welcome everyone to the next lecture on data analytics using Excel. I am Dhruv. I will be your tutor for the day. By the end of this lecture, you will be learning one of the most clear topic in Microsoft Excel, which is using VBA and macros. By the end of this lecture, you will see if you are able to apply these techniques in real life, you will save up your time by at least 50-60%, and that's where the major part of our efficiency will be building up. If you have to give you a gist about what we will be doing, whatever we have done in our last 4 lectures, the particular project, we were getting data from Google Finance and we were trying to create a portfolio strategy to take trades in. We are actually going to automate some portion of it, so it takes you a very little time to actually do all the processes together. So I hope you have looked for the last 4 lectures that I have actually posted, and now if you are here, there are a couple of things that you need to take care of before we actually dive into the entire thing. So be with me and learn with me. So if you can see my screen now, I have data of 10 years from 2012 to 2022, and then all of this data is for the top 750 companies. And what I essentially want is these companies are there in front of me, but I want all of these companies to be concatenated with NSE. Then, as we have discussed, all the steps we discussed in our last 4 lectures, you have to do all of that for each and every year. Now, imagine that you are doing the same process for all of these worksheets one by one, how much time it will consume. And just because of that, we're going to automate this entire thing. Before we actually use the entire process, what you actually have to do, you have to go to the file option. Once you're in the file option, then you have to go to the options bar, and under options, you have to go to add-ins. And once you have the add-ins window, you actually have to go with Excel add-ins, then have to click on OK. And then you have to enable analysis toolpack VBA, Euro currency toolpack, solver add-in, and analysis toolpack. Now, some of the students might have a doubt that they have more add-ins or less add-ins as compared to the sheet that I have. But do not worry. Click on all the add-ins and click on OK. Once you have that, you will actually have these two tabs in front of you, which are automate and developer. If not, then you have to go to file again, options, then add-ins. Under add-ins, you actually have to select actions or XML expansion packs and click on OK and see what all is available. Sometimes the VB might not be available in the Excel add-ins only, so you have to locate where the add-in is for VBA. So for me, I'll be working with the developer tab in this particular lecture, and there are a couple of things which we can see right now in front of us. The first one being record macro, and this is exactly what we want to work with. So record macro is one thing, and then we have to run these macros. Although if you enable this, you can also start recording using this icon, right? So we will click on record macros and see what will happen if we actually do something. So what I essentially need to do is to follow up all the processes, but I need to do it for all the sheets, and using macros, I can automate it. So at the end of the day, we are learning how we can automate the entire process. So the first thing that I would like to do is actually go to record macro, and instead of actually going there, I'll just copy paste this data and the next sheet is cleaner. I was thinking I will do it in this sheet only, but it's best that I actually paste it in this sheet instead. Control V. Yep. You'll understand why I'm doing it in some time as well. So I'll click on record macro. So there are 3 items which you actually have to fill. Description is something that you might want to fill, you might not want to fill. But the first that I need to fill is macro name. So because I'm working with Google Finance, so I will actually write the name as Google Finance only. Finance, right? Now, second thing is shortcut key. Also, there is an error here which I will be telling you after some time. Then we have the shortcut key as Control X. What X can be anything. Now, the general consensus is that you actually use those keys which are not used, all the time, like Control A, C, X, V, P, T, for creating the entire table. These are the Control Z. These are the tools, or let's say keys, which are used like a lot when you're actually working with Microsoft. That's why you don't want to do it. So if you have the macro for Control C, copy might not work, or maybe copy will work and a macro might not work. So always have to take the key which is not being used majorly. Although to actually solve this entire problem, what I actually suggest is click on Shift and then click on whatever key you want. If you will do that, you will see you can have Control Shift and another option A. So to run the entire macro, you have to click on Control Shift A. Right now, you might not be able to understand how this might work, But just know that I'll be teaching you everything one by one. Just know that you have to run in a particular key, right? So for now, I will not actually go with Control Shift. I'll actually go with, let's say, Control Q. I feel like doing that. The second thing is, where do you want to store the macro? You have three options. There's a personal macro workbook, there's a new workbook, or this workbook. So for this particular lecture, because I know whatever I'm doing will be in this workbook alone, then I'll actually go with this workbook only. If I actually have to go with another workbook, then I can choose between personal macro workbook or new workbook, whatever I want, right? And then you can actually write a small description of what you're actually doing in this entire macro, so that you can understand later if you forget what is this macro doing for you, right? Because you sometimes what we do, we actually create 4 or 5 macros in a particular Excel file, and then we forget what is the meaning of a particular macro and how it will actually work for us. So for me, I will actually write automating the process for Google 10 years. This will actually tell me that I'm doing it for all the years together. And if I'm going to click on OK, there will be an error, a syntax error. Now, the word finance is highlighted here. As I was telling you, there is an error here because I created that error deliberately so that you know what I'm actually doing. When you're actually writing a name for a macro, you cannot use spaces, and that's why you have to use the underscore. And if I'm going to click on OK, there's an error again. Start with the letter or underscore. Doesn't include space or character, that isn't allowed. Doesn't conflict with an existing name in the workbook. Now, if I'm going to click on OK again, you can see the entire word is highlighted. But if you can actually carefully see, there is a space here at the end. There's a second space which you might have to remove, right? So you have to be really careful when you're actually writing the name. That's one thing. I'm telling this to you right now. It might sound very stupid that I'm telling you this, but the thing is, if I'm not going to tell you this and you're trying to, let's say, write a name and you're not able to, you might get very irritated with the entire thing. So for the same, I'm solving that. And if I'm going to click on OK, there is already a macro assigned to that key. You should assign a different keyboard shortcut. So what is happening here is, in this entire worksheet, I already had a macro the same name. So the second problem that we might be able to see is that in the entire workbook, you cannot create multiple macros with the same key, right? So you need to take care of that. And let's say because of that, I'm going to use, let's say, Control Shift I. Okay, if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to click on OK, right? The second thing that you might see that is this option change in front of you. So instead of actually record macro, now it is stop recording. So now you have to do nothing but just do whatever you were doing before this, right? So I was actually writing MSC here. I'll actually write concat function. I'll use this, I'll use that, click on OK. Then I'm going to fill it down. Then we have a problem. This is because of this. We'll solve it. And we're going to go here again. And then I have to write 1 plus 1. And then I actually have to write for all these. Then if this equal to odd, and give the number again, then give me this, otherwise give me nothing. And instead of writing the new code for even, I'm actually going to copy this and write here and just change odd to even, because the entire syntax is same. I don't need to write the entire function again. And I chose this, and I'm going to click on enter, selecting both together, writing it like that, and then with equal to, and this, Control D. There will be some zeros here as always, the way we actually discussed this, but we will be able to take care of that by scrolling a little down. And we have our zeros here. We have to delete all of these zeros. Then we have to select everything. And all we have to do is do Alt H V S V, paste, and we have to go with transpose. You have to go with mouse to do that. Then if I'm going to click on OK, you see the entire process is done now. And the minute it is done for you, you click on stop recording, right? Now, what you necessarily have to do is actually copy, let's say, data of 2012. Right now I use data of, I'm not sure, but I guess it was this year. Yeah, it was this year. And if I'm going to copy and paste it here, and let's say now when I'm doing this, these are getting updated, right? But this is not getting updated because we actually pasted that at values, and we cannot actually use paste as formulas because the references might change. So let's see what will happen if I'm going to run the macro, and you will now understand what is the meaning of running a macro. So the key was Control Shift I. It will take some time, and here you go. As you can see in front of you, in only 3 seconds, I was able to automate the entire thing, and now it's just there in front of me. I need not do the entire thing by myself again and again. Now, if I have to show you how it will work around when I'm actually going with, let's say, any particular year, let's say 15, I'll select all the tickers, do Control C, paste them here, Control V, and now all I have to do is Control Shift I. And now again everything changed. Now if you are not able to believe what just happened, you can see that I have Mangalam here, Mangalam is here, then this is coming here, then Rushil is coming to the third point and whatnot. All of these figures are coming in a certain way, right? And what you can also do, what I didn't do, is actually have to copy and paste all of them in my Google finance workbook also. So I can probably actually select all of that and paste it, copy and paste it using macros as well. So instead of stopping at just pasting these figures using transpose function, I can copy them also. So I don't actually even have to click on Control C. All I have to do is go to Google Sheets and then do Control V. If you actually have to see how it will happen, you can create the entire macro again. Now the second thing which you might have to know is this particular icon of macros. So if I'm going to click on this, you can see some weird macros coming in front of you. I've written personal, auto recovered, macro 4, person equals marry me. So 2 examples which I generally give to my students. For this lecture, we were working on this, and you can also run the macro using the run function from this particular pane that we opened up using the macros under developer tab. Now you can edit it, but sometimes if you have hidden the that's why I have different workbooks. You will not able to edit the entire thing if you have hidden workbooks, right? So always make sure, but whatever, let's say, workbook you're working with, or let's say whatever macro you are creating, you're not hiding the entire workbook. Right now, if I have to change it, or let's say I won't be able to even delete it, right? So I always prefer, you can go ahead and you can hide your workbooks if you want, but I prefer, if you really have to hide your workbooks, you can password protect your workbook in the first place. You don't need to necessarily do for the, you hide the entire workbook. So prefer not going with the idea that I have here macro 4 and macro 3, because now I cannot even edit, and macro 4 is the one which actually took Control Q from me. So I don't even have that option with me anymore, right? So we always have to make sure that the macros are aligned in a particular way. But for this lecture, we understood that we can actually go with run. We can delete the macro if you want. If you think that you don't need the macro at all anyway now, you can delete the macro if you want. Then we have options tab, edit tab, and step into. What I would like to you to know is, actually, let's try with step into once. Now a VBA window will open in front of you, and you will see exactly what you were doing is being replicated here, right? So it actually wrote the entire code for you. So for the subject, that is the name of the macro, is Google Finance, right? This is the name, and this is a description: automating the process for Google Finance 10 years. This is why we need to write the description most of the time, so that we know what exactly is being done in this entire macro. We might remember it, but it's always a good practice to write a description. Then we have the keyboard shortcuts here, that is Control Shift I, and we first selected C1, and then we actually wrote NSC, active self, and it actually completed the entire code for us. And whenever we'll actually click on Control Shift 1, it will start from C1, and it will actually write this entire code for us in each and every cell where we are situated right now. So if I have to close this, yes, click on OK, and let's say I'm going with another sheet, and I'm going to, let's say, any cell here, and I'm going to write, let's say, go to macros. I want this to run. It will take 1 to 2 seconds to run it. And now you can see that NSC was there. There were no tickers here, but the reference is still here, irrespective of data being present here or not, or me starting from, let's say, cell G11. It will always and always start from C11. If you have to work around this and you have to work around, let's say, if you want the macro to run on only G7 or G8 or wherever in the entire worksheet, then you actually have to go with something known as use relative references. And we'll see how we can actually work around with that, but for not for this lecture. It's beyond our control for now. So there is one thing. Another thing that you always have to make sure is when you are sharing your workbooks, right? So here is a very important thing to understand when you are actually working with Excel in the first place, because there are various formats under Excel worksheet. It's not only one format in which you can actually give your file to someone else. So let's say you have a particular colleague in your department to whom you actually have to send the file. You might actually have to send the file which contains the macro in the first place, and he or she should be able to, he, she, or they, or whoever should be able to actually run that particular code, right? You tell them that, okay, you can actually go to macros, you can see what is happening, and you can run the code by themselves. You can open VBA. That's why you need to know what are the particular sheet. And if I have to tell you now, break on the suspense that we have, go to file, go to save as, and there's a name that is already given to my Excel workbook. But let's say I'm going here, and now all you have to check is this Excel macro enabled workbook, XLSM. Right, you really have to make sure that you know what exactly is happening here. If you're saving it as workbook, then whatever file you have will not save the macros. It will run the macros only and only if the entire workbook is macro enabled. So if you have to save, always save as macro enabled workbook, and then browse to whichever place you want, and then save across, and then send across. Right, so that is one thing that you really need to take care of before you actually work with, and then you can save it wherever you want and do whatever you think will be appropriate. So this was it. You can actually try it out for any particular year, or you can actually, let's say, do anything in Excel and record it. It might take let's say 1, 2, 3, or 4 hours for you to create a particular report, but if you know that you have to repeat the certain task over and over again, you can actually do the entire thing by just recording the macro. It's just that easy. Right, so always remember how to actually work with this. That would be it from my end. I hope you will be able to learn and apply macros from different sources again, because macros is something that you have to practice at least twice or thrice, and then only you will be very comfortable with it. So create your own examples. You can, let's even create a number series, right, and then create a macro and then run the macro. Or whatever, you can write your name and you can create a macro related to that. Just record the macro when you're writing your name, and then you run the macro wherever you want. You can do that also, but whatever feels necessary for you, right? That would be it from my end. If you have any doubts, you can always contact me. I will love to help all of you. Happy learning, everyone.